Hello, welcome to the Tuple Podcast. Today I'm talking to Andreas Kling. Andreas is the author of, believe it or not, an operating system that he wrote from scratch called Serenity OS. It started as a solo project for him, but now has hundreds of contributors. He's also a bit of a YouTube phenom. He's got more than 1,000 videos on YouTube, tons of subscribers. He has more or less built a movement around this fascinating project of building an OS from scratch. Now he's also embarked on a browser from scratch. He's a man of ambition. He is a really fun person to talk to about code, but also personal things. I really enjoy this conversation. I hope you enjoy listening to it. So I thought it would be interesting to start with something that I saw in the frequently asked questions on Serenity OS's GitHub. And the question was, will Serenity OS support this thing? And the answer was maybe, maybe not. There is no plan. And the next question is, will you implement this thing? And it says, maybe someday, maybe never. If you want to see something happen, you can do it yourself. And the thing that popped into my mind when I saw these responses was actually that there's sort of a parallel between this, I think, and the term lifestyle business. So as compared to a VC business, which is supposed to get, a VC-backed business, which needs to get as big as possible, as fast as possible, a lifestyle business is maybe more optimized around the happiness of its founders and its employees, and it seeks profit, but it considers those things as part of it. And the phrase that came to me was kind of like this, almost like, it feels a little bit like lifestyle software to some extent, where it's being done for the love of the people that are making it. Does that sound right?
That's absolutely right. Yeah. Those FAQs are pretty old by now. They're some of the very earliest things that we put in because they were so frequent in the beginning. People did not understand why we were doing what we were doing, or they were really interested in asking us to add features for them. And that every time that would happen, it would always turn into a discussion of us trying to make them understand that they have to do it, right? And it's worked out really well, I would say. We've been doing this for 5+ years now, and we still get people coming in and they ask us to implement something, and we just point them at the FAQ and say, no, you do it. But come on, it'll be fun, right? And maybe half of people actually leave at that point, but the half that stick around, they have a lot of fun and they stick around for a long time. So it is very much a lifestyle software kind of thing. It started just for myself to have something to do, and I hoped when I opened it up to the world that it would invite others to use it in the same way that I was. I never thought we would make a product out of it or try to formalize a release process or anything like that. I really just wanted sort of a Zen garden or a Zen kindergarten for developers, if you will, where you could just go and chill and have fun with programming.
Yeah, I like that. And it seemed like a core tenet for you was that you should be able to get to the source of everything up and down the stack all the way. Mm-hmm. And so it's not even just a Zen garden, but it's like a Zen garden all the way down. Like, have fun playing at the lowest levels if that's what you want.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I came from the last big tech job I had before making Serenity was working at Apple for many years. And I was so used to having control of the whole stack because Apple they make all the hardware as well, but they make all the software, like every layer of the stack from the bootloader to the printer software to the graphical interfaces and stuff. And being in that world, it just felt so weird when I left Apple that the rest of the world of software didn't function that way. Especially coming back to Linux, which I used to use in the past, and it was just a very, very distributed patchwork of software from different sources made by different people in different ways, and super different from Apple. So I wanted to sort of just get back to that Apple way of doing things, and the logical way to get there, I figured, was to just make it myself.
Yeah, and Linux is nominally
open source and hackable all the way down. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like in theory, that is all doable, but in practice, there are so many different teams and stakeholders, and all of the bits are spread out all over. And to like upstream a patch is quite a process.
Right. Yeah. And there, there are many programming languages at play. You have different companies or stakeholders, as you say. That the real pain when you try to do anything in Linux that isn't trivial or localized to a single software package, like if you try to do cross-cutting sort of vertically integrated changes in the Linux desktop, the level of coordination required is prohibitively cumbersome, let's say. And at Apple, it was just so easy because you have all the people making the entire stack within the same company, and you can go find the expert at everything. And it just seemed kind of sad to me that the world of open source hadn't copied that from Apple, because they like to copy things that the big tech companies make. Like in the 90s, Linux used to copy the way Windows would look, and then they started copying the way Mac OS would look, but they never copied the way the software was made. So that was my contribution, I guess, to the open source community.
Yeah, and it seems like a really key thing here actually is that maybe there's two things, and tell me if there's more. Is like one is that it's a mono repo, so all the pieces are all in one place. You could do one PR to change some sort of cross layer concern that goes like high to low, and all the pieces are there to be seen, and sort of one approver can get this patch landed across this whole stack, and also that there's one language. So you're not bouncing between a bunch of different architectures or languages.
Yeah, and we were able to make progress really, really fast. We were able to stand up a reasonably capable GUI desktop in just 2 years originally. And then, development pace has slowed down as people sort of found their focus areas that they wanted to go deeper on. But as a way of building software, I think we definitely showed that the monorepo approach, where you have everything unified, centralized, is a very, very efficient way of building software. So yeah, we're very happy with that. And even to this day, nowadays people do specialize more in the project, so we see less new apps and new frameworks and stuff like that. We're more like we're maturing our existing stack. But even still, the monorepo still makes it easy to do this type of development as well, because as you refactor APIs, for example, or you change the way that some components interact, the fact that you have to commit the change to every piece of software in the system at the same time just forces you to make it compile at the very least. It has to pass tests everywhere. So it just facilitates the development of a large system, I think. And it would be really interesting to see other operating systems developed in this way. I think the BSDs come a little bit closer because Linux is a huge patchwork of random software, but FreeBSD, NetBSD, and OpenBSD, and those kind of systems, they have sort of a core which has their kernel and all the command line utilities and drivers and a bunch of stuff is part of sort of the core. And then they still layer GUI software on top of that. But they are a little bit closer to what we were doing at Apple and what we're now doing in SerenityOS.
It's really, I'm struck. So I watched your most recent update videos of where you're doing, I think it's a weekly or a monthly update of the projects. And one of the things you demoed was someone added the interactive flag, like the -I to the copy command, the CP command. And the thing that really stood out to me was, I think in a project that's 5-ish years old, let's say, you're probably adding a new thing is probably quite challenging because all the easy stuff has been picked up. And so if you're adding a new thing, it's probably relatively difficult. I imagine this particular thing to add the interactive mode was not very hard. And the thing about building such a thing with so much scope is there's lots of places for people to make small contributions. and gives this. So you give an open source contributor an easy path in that makes it probably helps the project a ton because there's just a lot of surface area where they can contribute.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Another project of the same age would have run out of easy first issues a long time ago, as you say. But given our ridiculous scope, I sometimes wonder if we are the sort of the largest scope project on GitHub. I don't know. It's possible.
Yeah, I don't know how you could add much more to it, or like what is bigger than this.
I don't know. We could start adding a website to it, maybe. But it's definitely still easy for new people to come in, and traditionally we've traditionally had this approach to onboarding new people where instead of giving them a list of issues that we think they should attack, we tell everybody, hey, why don't you just build the system, boot up, and then mess around until you find something that doesn't work, or something you think could be better, and then try to work on that. And this simple little thing has made it so that everybody who comes in just has their own perspective on what they think should be done. And they sort of hit the ground running in their own direction instead of everybody joining in sort of the shared direction. And that has been super healthy over a long period of time for the project.
Are you saying no a lot? Do you just let people
Not
follow
much.
their hearts on this? No? Okay.
It's strange how little I've had to say no. There have been a handful of times when there's almost a theme to the things I've said no to. It's whenever somebody wanted to fragment the sort of desktop paradigm that we were building. So they were like, oh, I think it should be configurable so that it could have sort of a Mac OS dock instead of a sort of Windows 2000 start menu bar. And then I should be able to select the GUI paradigm with a checkbox. We've had that a couple of times. People try to do that. And I always just said, no, let's just build like a single paradigm system because it's much easier to understand and reason about. But for the most part, somebody comes along with some random change, it's going to get in. I mean, it might need a little polish, but for the most part, it gets in. I think there's a second part to that, though, is that I've been pretty good at just communicating and broadcasting what the system is and what it is about. So people have a really good feel for where it wants to go. I have, I think over 1,000 videos on YouTube of me just working on the system and talking about it. So everybody who came in that way, they were very well aware of what the whole thing was about. So they just came in and they just continued based on their understanding of that.
So powerful. That's so interesting. I was just thinking, like, imagine if your company had 1,000 YouTube videos talking about its values and its culture, and someone had watched some meaningful subset of that. You come in and you have so much context, and it's going to lead to actions that are going to be congruent with what's already happening.
Yeah, I think so. Although, I mean, if you put that in the context of a business, it starts to get a little bit weird at some point, I think, because it's hard to ask, a new hire to watch 1,000 videos about company culture.
Yeah. But even 5, even 3, I feel like I have a taste of it after a couple, and it's like you've done a great job of distilling and this is like classic business advice for companies. Just like as you get going, you start adding more people to the team, it becomes hard to individually shape their contributions to align with everyone else's. And so the sort of standard advice is develop your company values so that people can make local decisions and have them end up congruent with everything else. And you are like your values are out there, and that helps new people show up and contribute.
Yeah. It has been very, very powerful indeed. And I think I had no idea that would happen when I started it. It sort of just turned into a really good outcome. I was just making videos because it made me uncomfortable. And I thought, wow, this is really, really unpleasant. Why is this so scary to me? I need to do more of it. And over time, I grew more comfortable. And then it has had all these interesting side effects. But It is very interesting what you say about sort of transferring culture. And I think I've learned through this project that video is an amazing medium for that, especially the type of sort of unedited raw video that I've put out, I guess it can be very scary to put out because you're not editing, you're not filtering, you're just kind of sitting and absorbing my workflow. But at the same time, that's a lot of what I did when I worked at the companies where I worked. So I spent so much time at Apple just sitting with senior engineers, watching them work and commenting on what they were doing, or we would have a conversation about what they're changing, and then they would come and sit with me, and we would do this for hours. And I guess pair programming in a way. Actually,
Yeah, I would definitely call that pairing for sure.
yeah, it was
In my
pairing.
book,
It was pairing.
two engineers looking at the same set of code is pairing.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's strange. My concept of pair programming has changed so much since everything became remote that now I think of it as like two people on the screen sharing software. But
Yeah.
no, the original pairing, of course, was just sitting at the same computer. And my YouTube videos became a way for me to invite people to pair with me at a scalable level. So it is asynchronous because they can only leave comments that I can't see live. But even so, I was able to sort of pass on a lot of the stuff that I learned while pairing at my various jobs. So that was pretty wholesome. And yeah, people liked it.
Yeah. So is there no live chat then when you're coding on these streams?
For the most part, I've done pre-recorded videos and uploaded those. I've streamed a whole bunch, but I get so distracted by the chat that my streams were just like me talking to chat for an hour or 2 hours. And I tried a couple of times to do coding tasks, but it always fell apart because somebody would say something and I would feel like, oh, I have to talk about that. And, so yeah, I couldn't hack it.
It's interesting how much hunger there is for raw video of people coding things with all the mistakes and delays and confusion and all that. Like you might sort of think that a polished version is better, and yet it seems like the actual experience in real time is what people want, and I feel like it's actually still undersupplied. I think I think there's a hunger for it, and there could be way more of it than there is.
I totally agree. And the sneaky thing about that is that I tried editing one of my videos once, and I liked it so much better when it was edited. I was like, oh, wow, they don't have to see my stupid mistakes, and I look like I just figure everything out right away. This is fantastic.
Yeah,
But-
your ego liked it.
My ego liked it, right. But
Yeah.
it was just a worse product in the end because I think, I don't know if this is unique to programmers, but I would say we definitely, as a community, have a high degree of imposter syndrome and like people just struggling with their sort of self-perception and perception of their own skills. And just watching somebody more experienced struggle a little bit can be so helpful in releasing you from that prison, right?
Yep. I think not even just helping with imposter syndrome, although I totally agree that is a big benefit. I think another is learning how someone who is experienced gets unstuck. Like, what are the tools they reach for? How do they debug things? I think is that's part of the some of that knowledge. I think is the harder to come by bits of becoming a good programmer. Is dealing with problems and developing an intuition for when a certain approach is likely to yield results.
For sure, yeah. And that's also what I love about pairing is that when you pair with somebody, then you're sort of just absorbing all of this stuff passively that the other person has spent their career picking up from a million places. And you pair with somebody and you're just sharing all this stuff. You make a sort of a soup of your combined experiences and you drink from it together. It's a strange process, but I have 2 employees nowadays, and we pair every week, and it's so much fun because they just work in different ways than I do. Although there's some overlap because they watched a lot of my videos, but
Sure.
but still, it's great to just watch them work through stuff, and I get to pick up new things from them as well.
Yeah. I think that is actually still a bit underappreciated. Is I think if you pair with someone for half an hour, you will learn something almost guaranteed.
Yeah, for sure.
There's even if you're in an area of the code base you're totally familiar with, if you're solving a rote boilerplate kind of problem, something about the way they write a commit message or some little utility that they reach for to solve something, it's so dense, it's so rich with information. It's really hard not to learn something. Where if I'm programming by myself, even solving interesting problems, I might not be I don't feel like I'm learning new things at the same rate.
Yeah, for sure. And there's another thing that happens also, which is that I can only speak for myself, but I do some stupid things sometimes, where I do something in a really, really cumbersome and overly complicated way that could be simplified. I just haven't bothered to learn how to simplify this. And when you pair with somebody, then they can call you out. Like, hey, why are you going through these 10 steps to do something that you can do with one command? And very often it's something you do with Git. That somebody who's learned about Git can give you like the incantation to achieve the same thing in one command instead of 4. And that has been very helpful as well.
Yeah. That's and like that subtle pressure of someone else being there, I think pushes code quality up too. Mm-hmm. You're like, I don't want to do the hacky version because you're sitting right here. Like, how do we do this the better way again? Let's look at the docs and figure it out.
Yeah, and it's whenever I pair with somebody, and then we don't get to the point where there's going to be a pull request from what we worked on, but a pull request is sort of uploaded like an hour after we finish pairing or something like that. It is so much easier to review it when I've been there through the whole process, obviously. And I feel sometimes like if you could pair on all code, that would probably make it better. And it's just not practical, but it probably would make all code better.
I think it's a hard argument to argue against. That feels right to me. Like I think it pushes the code quality up for the code itself, for sure.
Yeah.
Like I think people, it seems like as an industry, we have basically accepted like, oh, you have to review code before you merge it. We've also accepted code reviews. Yes, they're annoying, They take time, they block work, but they're worth it because they increase quality, they prevent bugs, they spread knowledge. I think most of what people want from code reviews, you get more of from pairing.
Right. Yeah, code reviews is just pair programming light. You know, it's like a more scalable form of pair programming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I wouldn't make the argument that like there is no trade-offs here. Like pairing is more exhausting, and you're more limited. You could review a bunch of PRs in a day. Doing a lot of pairing in a day can be tough. But I think in practice, a lot of code review is like trends towards a fairly light cursory review of something. And there's this strong social pressure to not be too nitpicky or especially not push back on like architectural decisions in a big way. Like when someone lands a big PR and you're like, oh, I really wouldn't have done it like this. I think there's like a much better way to do this, but it's already done. Am I really going to like ask this person to go back and redo this and or reject this as is? But if you're pairing with this person, you can get that input in early before it's so hard to undo. And those little nitpicky things are just you kind of like keeping an eye out as you code. And like you can be like, oh, we forgot this thing. Oh, maybe we should change this name a little bit. Or like, oh, do we have a test for this? It's easier to push back, I think, on the big and the small when it's happening in real time with pairing.
Yeah, very much so.
How do you think about intimidation when starting monumental things like you have? Because it seems like
intimidation.
Yeah, my read from the outside is that when you started the OS, you didn't really think it was going to go anywhere. So you maybe didn't think, I'm going to build an entire operating system. That's really scary. How do I even get going? You were just thinking, I want to spend some time programming and have an outlet and find something kind of fun to do. It was sort of my impression. And so maybe that works for that. You sort of tricked yourself, or you just sort of didn't anticipate. You didn't know where it was going, and so it was like you didn't have you didn't need to have that freak out. But now it seems like you're picking bigger projects and stating fairly ambitious goals for them up front. Like, we're going to make a browser and it's going to be cross-platform. Or like, we're going to make a programming language and eventually rewrite everything in it. So it seems to me like you have figured out a way to at least somehow live with this fear. And I'm curious how you did it.
Yeah, I think the thing that I discovered was that if I just set goals that are far out enough in the future, that makes it a lot easier. Because if I just say that, oh, I'm going to build a browser, it will be cross-platform and you can browse the entire web. If I don't say a time frame, I feel like I have to hurry up. But if I say that this is going to take a couple of years, then it sort of becomes more, I don't know, doable to me, because I know that if I have a couple of years, it's just a matter of grinding every day on my task list and showing up every day, making a little progress, getting a little bit better every day, and over time that builds up. So setting these long scopes and being comfortable with them, at least, is what helped me become totally fine with making these sort of grand schemes. And it's working so far, at least. But that's might also be because we didn't hit any of those long time frame endpoints yet.
No, I think, to me, the fear is worst at the beginning before you're starting to make some progress. And because the progress feels exciting and probably provides motivation. So I guess I'm most impressed that you would be willing to like get going when it's sort of the hardest and the boulder isn't rolling at all yet.
Okay, well, that I always found that pretty easy. Like just kicking the stone so it starts rolling. That part is easy for me, and I think it's easy for a lot of people. But then they give up when they realize how much work there is going to be to it.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So maybe I'm a type of developer that has an easy time starting new projects. And in the past, I also had a very easy time giving up on those projects once I started realizing, oh my goodness, this is going to take forever. And at least the key hack in my brain was to just say, well, this is going to take forever, so let's do it. Yeah. Just admitting that from the get-go. But I think it can be it's true that you can make a lot of progress early on, and it can be sort of intoxicating almost that, my goodness, look at all this progress, right? But over time, you start to make smaller incremental progress. That's just the nature of software projects, is that as they mature, incremental day-to-day progress is smaller as a percentage of your total progress. And that's also something that you have to be comfortable with. And I think I became comfortable with that in my career, working at Nokia and Apple and companies where you had huge software stacks already. And there was no way for me to contribute like radical changes to the software stack. It just was not possible because it was gigantic. So I learned to be comfortable with that sort of slow incremental progress where I knew I could contribute 1% performance improvement to Safari in a week, for example. If I focused, I could do that. And I learned to appreciate that as like a worthy goal or a worthy piece of progress. And that has helped me a lot now, because now our software has gotten to the point where we have to do these like smaller pieces of progress and accept that they are now normal for us to do smaller things. And it hasn't been, I think some people have sort of disappeared from the project over the years because they enjoyed that rate of progress we had in the beginning. But for me, it always seemed like a temporary thing. Like, it's going to be fast paced and fun while we're standing all this new architecture up. But once it's in place, we're going to have to paint. Painting is going to take time.
Yeah. I think I saw somewhere, I don't remember which project it was, but I think you laid out something like a 10-year plan, or you said like, this might take 10 years. I'm not sure.
Right.
And like, I could see how thinking at that scale and kind of pre-committing, like, in 10 years, I'll be working on this still. And so like, let me, the scope of what we could get done in that huge chunk of time is pretty large. So we're fine to like go after this.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's something that a lot of people found surprising when they first found me and the project, that I was talking about it in sort of those scale terms. And yeah, and it's now 5 years later, and we are further along in many ways than I thought we would be after 5 years. Focus has changed a lot in ways I didn't predict, but my goodness, we got a lot of stuff done, so that's cool.
I interviewed a founder friend of mine about his company, and he said something, and the context was, well, if I'm going to be working on this for the rest of my life, ... And it was interesting to see how that would change your thinking so radically. Where it's like, instead of like, this is a 2 or 3 year thing, it's like, what if this were a 30-year thing? What kind of pace would you be okay with, or what kind of ambition would you be okay having?
Oh, that's such a good question. Yeah, exactly. If you start asking yourself that question, like, what if I do this for the rest of my life? What should the ambition level be? I think your answer says a lot about you as a person, right? And what should the pace be? So I enjoy learning about video game programming. I don't actually do it. I think many programmers are like this. We sort of get into programming because we're going to make games. It's going to be awesome. But then it turns out we just like playing games. I don't know. I was like that. But I liked learning about how games are made. And I think one of the weird things to me about how games are made is that you make a game, well, at least in the past, you would make a game and then you're finished. You sell it, and then you move on to a new game. Nowadays, it's a little murky because, you have DLC and updates and whatnot, but it seems very much like you sort of burst develop something and you make 90% of the profit in one big chunk. And that type of software development is totally foreign to me. I like this long, drawn-out, large-scale stuff, and that's definitely what we're doing. And the types of projects I've chosen to build also are just, there's no way to finish an operating system or a web browser or a programming language.
You have a lot of people contributing now, but I still notice you at the sort of the top of the contributor list, even this week. Like you have more commits this week than any of the contributors to the project. So you're still cranking, obviously. How are you? You seem to have a lot of output. You seem to be very fast. Like when I watch you type, it is quick. You seem to have a pretty high clock speed. How are you so prolific? Was this a thing you trained? Did it happen pretty fast? And this is kind of just a natural state of you, or is this the result of lots and lots of trying to get a little better with various techniques?
I think lots and lots of incremental progress. I definitely got better over time. I think I still do. I try to get better all the time. And I guess one of the things that I try to always be conscious of is looking for ways to improve. And maybe the best example of this in recent times is AI and LLMs. And there is a large group of people that just refuse to use them for programming because they think that it is silly, or they see something wrong with it, or they feel like this isn't right to do this. And me, I was all over it immediately because here is a way to improve as a programmer. I thought, like, a better tool, right? What could be better in this life than a better tool than what I already have? And just, I try to always remember that there's always going to be better tools, and I have to learn the new tools and find the new tools and try them, get comfortable with them. That's the way to stay on top.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, I think I noticed in my programming career, and I think this is fairly common, I had a ton of appetite for new tools when I was relatively new. I was ready to learn all the things and try all the approaches. And then maybe 5-ish years into my programming journey, I now have a toolkit that I'm very comfortable with and is very familiar. And I started to notice a little less interest in fresh tools or trying new approaches. And now 10 or 15 years in, I have, I think, even less. And I'm a little bit more like, I'm sticking with Vim. I don't care. Like there's, if there's something better, that's fine, but I'm a Vim guy. I've just decided. But it seems like you have maintained that appetite of like, give me the latest, give me the best. I want to get better at all costs, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, within reason, let's say. I think in web development, for example, which I know that you're a bit more in that space, there are so many tools all the time coming out that it's not really feasible to stay on top of all the new tools in web development. And I've been in more low-level development where tools tend to come out a little bit more manageable pace. But when new languages come out, for example, I like to spend some time to learn them. Even I don't become proficient in them, but I like to see sort of what are the ideas and what can I learn from this. And that's perhaps the one thing that has been bad for me about these projects that I started, is that I get way less exposure to other programming projects these days because I spend so much time in this sort of cinematic universe that I spawned here, that I don't know what's going on in other programming projects so much anymore. I have this outdated knowledge of what other projects look like. But yeah, no, I think it definitely helps me to try to learn new things and also like always stay programming. Try to write some code every day, I think that's probably where a lot of people start to fall off a little bit. If you get comfortable not writing code, that's something that has actually become a challenge for me in the last year because I got a bunch of larger sponsorships, which allowed me to take on some employees, and then I had a bunch of administrative stuff around that, and a bunch of other things that crept into my weekly calendar. And suddenly there's all this other stuff I have to do. And some days I have to make myself program, which is new to me because I've never been a manager in the past. And now I'm managing a little bit. So I totally see that what can happen to somebody if you let it slip away from you.
Yeah. Yeah. I can tell you from experience, you'll have to fight for the programming eventually. 2 employees, not so hard. If it keeps going, it can kind of slip away from you. I did it intentionally and I was okay with it, but it's the burden of management and non-coding tasks as your organization expands is very real.
Yeah. But at the same time, I really enjoy the sort of almost like leveraged programming that you can do with people, right?
Yep.
It is amazing to be able to just talk to another person and sort of agree on something, and then they go and do it.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. The first time I really started experiencing that for real was incredible. And this was it's like someone else is working on our business, and it feels so good. And we're trading money for it. Everyone's winning here basically. And we're paying this coordination cost of having a person here. But yeah, when PRs start landing and changes start getting pushed, and now Tuple improves in ways that I didn't even know it was improving. Like it's like the project just happened, and like goes out the door, and it's like wow, that's sort of the next level thing. A founder friend told me one time this experience of refreshing the landing page for his product, and it looked newer and better. And he was like, I didn't even know we're doing that. That's incredible. I get it now.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It is pretty wonderful overall. There's trade-offs, of course, but it is awesome to see.
Yeah, how big is your company now? Is it like 10, 12, something like that?
Yeah, like about 12, maybe 13.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so people don't know this, but Spencer. You've actually been coaching Spencer for a long time, since the early days.
Yes, for a very long time. I don't even remember how long. For years.
It's probably 6 years at this point. We started about 6 years ago, and I think I feel like you and he started pretty quickly.
It's pretty early, maybe 4 years ago or something like that.
Yes,
5 years.
Yeah, Spencer is very good at figuring out what he needs to find in order to accomplish something and like doing that thing. And like seeking out coaching is totally part of that package that he does. And so as we realized, hey, we're all web programmers who wrote a lot of Ruby, and now we have this real-time communication thing written in C++. He was like, I need a coach that knows what he's doing. And so
Right.
you probably know more about Tuple than almost anybody outside the team, at least architectural, at least technically.
That's possible, yeah. Given that you're not open source, yeah.
Yeah.
I've known Spencer for a long time now. He came to me because he wanted to get better at low-level programming very quickly. And I hadn't done anything like that before, but I had mentored people at my jobs, so I figured it was similar to that. And then I gave him a whole bunch of low-level programming projects, and he was like a real trooper, like just churning through all kinds of things I was giving him. Like we wrote emulators and video games and whatnot. It was a good time. And I thought for a while that I wanted to do more coaching, but it is very time consuming. And I ended up not pursuing that any further. But we still have an ongoing relationship. So it's just evolved beyond coaching because now Spencer does other things.
Yes.
I guess you know that.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, that's understating it, I would say. But
Yeah.
but thank you for your role in like Tuple's technical success. Like Spencer did the work, but having a good coach was very helpful, and I am sort of the indirect benefit of your coaching. So thank you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, it was awesome to see just how that injection of confidence in somebody can lead to so much productivity. Especially if you have somebody who's like very talented, they just need a little confidence boost, like to feel more competent, more confident, and then they can go and do amazing things very quickly.
That's interesting that you're that's interesting that that's the thing you flag, and like less like, oh, I needed to teach him about pointers or something, and more that like it sounds like more like the lesson was these things are not scary or magic, and you can, if you go build a few, you'll sort of lose that fear around it and gain the confidence.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I tell people all the time that the easiest way to understand how something big and complicated works is to make a tiny little model of it, in software at least, but probably in other things as well. I imagine in the physical space, if you can build a scale model of anything, it'll help you understand it better. My go-to piece of advice for people, because a lot of people have been asking me, like, how do I build a web browser? I want to make my own browser. Well, you just start by making a tiny little thing that can parse HTML, and then you start from there. Build a little miniature, right?
Yeah.
And it's super helpful.
That's so funny to hear you say that, because I've seen this behavior from the other side. And I would say this is actually a really core part of Tuple engineering culture, is that we build a lot of little prototypes. And so it's like, oh, we want to figure out this interaction and how it should feel. And we almost never build it right in the actual app at first. Instead, it's like a little playground app that just has that interaction until we agree that
Right.
that feels nice. And then we start putting it in the real thing. And I feel like a lot of our larger projects start with that thing that then gets thrown away.
Yeah, and build one to throw away is a key thing I learned from one of my old mentors at Apple, old coworker of mine there. He would always start every complicated project by building a piece of crap version of it and hack on it until it worked, and then just delete it and start over. And the first time I saw this, I was shocked. This is like, what on earth are you doing? That's 2 weeks wasted. But of course, I saw over time that once he had done that, he was able to rebuild it again in 2 days, and it was twice as good or even better. And
Right.
just
Yeah, I love that.
yeah.
So you gain the wisdom with the first version, and you try a
Right.
lot of things, and you could move fast and not worry about quality. And then when you delete it, you now get the joy of greenfield development, and a pristine start. but also you have this wisdom that you got the hard way that will inform the thing you're going to build.
Exactly. And oftentimes it doesn't come out exactly the same way the second time.
Yeah.
Which is the real benefit of throwing it away, of course, is that sort of when you revisit the process again and you go through the steps of building up the architecture, you notice that, oh, this could actually be done in a easier way or simpler way or whatever. And just as you were saying about pull requests, where you don't really want to nitpick about architectural decisions,
Yep.
you have the same sort of problem here where you accumulate architectural mistakes in that first version, and by deleting it, you can correct them. And probably otherwise, you might not do that. You
Right.
just get comfortable
Exactly.
and say like, "Yeah, it's fine."
Yep, exactly. All the inertia shows up because it's good enough. It's already there. It's already working. I'm getting close to this. I could just polish this where it is. And I think the challenge with spikes like that is actually throwing it away. I think there's this moment where like, am I really going to delete this? It's like, it really is pretty close. I could just, but that is, and I think that's where you really have to like exercise like the psychological power, because the magic comes when you do delete it and you start over from scratch. But I think there will probably be a moment of hesitation.
Yeah, and I definitely have been too weak sometimes, and I gave in and I kept the first version, even though I shouldn't have, and then I had to iterate on it later to make it better. So it's sort of an ideal scenario that you have the fortitude or the strength to throw it away, but sometimes you just want to make progress. Also, that's understandable. But yeah, I think building a lot of miniatures and throwing away the first version of stuff, super useful techniques.
Yeah, those feel like really good programmer wisdom lessons that show up in pair programming or this kind of thing, coaching interactions.
Yeah, it's tough in pair programming though to tell the other person that okay, so now it's the part where we throw everything away.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's you mentioned watching more senior engineers do this, and that's probably the easier version where it's like, hey, you're in charge. If you say this is how we do it, all right. If there's a little bit of power there, maybe.
Yeah. True. No, that was by far my favorite thing about working with senior engineers, was just getting to watch them work for any reason. It was so helpful. I think I learned more from that than any of the work I did by myself.
Yeah, same. And when people ask me how to improve as a programmer, my answer always is pair with someone that's more experienced. Like sit next to them, plug your keyboard into their computer so you can type too, and just work as closely to them as possible. I had this sort of like miracle 3 months of like programming development where I sat next to someone. I was learning Rails for the first time and Ruby, and I was sat next to someone who was much more experienced, and we just paired like many hours every day. And my rate of progress for that time was higher than it has ever been.
Yeah, I bet.
Before I forget, you mentioned that you have really leaned into AI and LLMs for writing code. What specific tools are you using there that you could recommend for folks?
Well, at the moment, I lean very heavily on the GitHub Copilot.
Okay.
And I have ongoing conversations with ChatGPT all day, every day, basically. Just like bouncing ideas and pasting code. And but one of the most nicest things that has happened to me is that I have become a very proficient Python programmer in the last few months, despite not writing much Python myself. It's just I realized that I want to like process this big data that I have. I have some like JSON that I've printed out from my program, and now I want to get a bunch of statistics from it or something, or I want to shape it somehow. And in the past, that would be like sitting and writing a bunch of, I don't know, I would do PHP or Perl or something, whatever language I would use to do that. And nowadays, I can just explain to ChatGPT what I want to do with this data. I paste in some of the data, and then I say, hey, can you draw me a graph of this data or whatever? And it just writes me a Python program. And I love that because I have enough programming experience that I understand how Python, sort of what Python is capable of. but I haven't spent the time with it to feel comfortable writing Python. So this is sort of the perfect tool here. Is like I have a proxy that allows me to write Python without learning Python, and I love that. I use it so much, and Copilot I use just as a very nice autocomplete, I guess. I mean, it is what it is, but I've used it so much that I've built an intuition for how to sort of provoke it into doing what I want. So I learned, for example, that if you structure your comments in a certain way, then it will follow from your comments and sort of pick up what it is that you're trying to do and then sketch out the code just the way you like it. And it's like a whole art form to that, if like prompting it via comments and putting all of your data structures nearby. And there are all these little things that you discover sort of intuitively by just using it a lot, right? And I think many people say, "Oh, I tried Copilot and it doesn't. I don't get the big charm and the big deal about it." But really, the big deal about Copilot you only discover once you've spent, I don't know, a week aggressively using it, I think. And I uploaded a video to YouTube. It was October last year, I think, where I wrote a JIT compiler for JavaScript in, I don't know, it was like an hour and a half or something using Copilot. And hundreds of people reached out to me about it, saying like, what the heck? I did not realize Copilot could do this. Because Copilot was like doing so much of the heavy lifting. I was just sort of commenting what I wanted it to do, and it went way faster than I could have ever done. That same thing would have taken me like 8+ hours in the past, because I would have had to look up a bunch of things and test and cross-reference, and the speed was just, whew.
That's awesome. We'll have to link to that. That sounds really useful.
Yeah, that video did really well.
Yeah, that's the beauty of recording what you're doing and publishing it. Is I don't have to now prompt you for all of your Copilot tips. We can send people to pair with you virtually to see how you're doing it.
True. And even that was like, what is that? Like almost half a year ago now, 4 months at least. And I've still used Copilot every day since then. So I've gotten way better at using it. And the only part that I don't love about this is that I'm not sure why I got better at using it or how, or what it is that I'm doing.
Oh, interesting.
Because you have to kind of actively think about what it is that you're doing to almost lead Copilot to doing what you want.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is subconscious or unconscious, that you're sort of discovering these things that don't work, and then you see them not work a couple of times. Mm-hmm. And then you start doing something a little bit differently, and that works, and now you feel more inclined to do that. And
yeah, you're training your own neural net to use this other one.
Very much, right? Yeah, you're just sort of synchronizing with Copilot.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting that this is a new skill for programmers to learn.
Yeah.
Like I guess
indeed.
tool use is always a skill, but this is sort of a new class of tools.
Right. Yeah, it attaches to you in a very different way. And we lost internet access here at home for a while. Mm-hmm. And my goodness, that was unpleasant, because now I didn't have Copilot. And I was not prepared for how much harder it was to just go back to not having it. It felt really weird. Like I felt naked. It was a bit like how you feel when you lose internet connection in general. It just felt like I had lost this capability to go fast, and I have to write everything myself again.
This feels like exactly the kind of subtle knowledge, workflow knowledge that is maybe hard to write down or distill. And you even just said, like, it's hard. You're not even sure what it is.
Yeah.
But by watching someone do it well, you can see the examples and kind of pick it up on it. And maybe you can't define all the rules yourself, but you can start to imitate that good use.
Totally. And I think the thing that scares me, I guess, about it is that somebody will put out a new LLM, or Copilot will get an upgrade, and then a lot of the stuff that I learned all these subconscious cues and triggers and whatnot, they no longer work, or they don't apply anymore, or they suddenly work differently. I don't know if that's going to be jarring or sort of uncanny, or how's that going to feel? Because I've tried some other AI products to program with, but none of them feel right in the way that Copilot does. But that's probably mostly habit, right? I've learned Copilot at this point.
Yeah. Or it could be better. It might be that no one has gotten to that level. It might just actually be better at it.
Yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah.
But it's exciting. I think this is super exciting stuff.
It's really cool. I've been out of the coding game for a little bit, and this is hearing you talk about this and other people saying similar things is like one of the strongest things pulling me back in. Where it's like I could not just get back into programming, but get back into programming significantly faster than before. That's pretty appealing.
Oh yeah. Once you get good at it, it's like at the very least a 3x multiplier, I would say.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And just in terms of like churning out code, not even doing thought work where you're figuring out architecture or anything, but just doing the work of like, I had no code. I know what I want to do, but I have to type it all out.
Yes.
It makes that so much faster.
Yeah.
Like if you know what you want to do, you can do it much, much faster with Copilot.
Totally. That makes sense. And I remember advocating for people to learn their editor really well and to get fast at typing. Because the time between I know what I want to be there and the code is there is all cost, right? You want that as small as possible. There's nothing good about that once you know what you want and what it should look like.
Sure. Yeah.
And so the fact that there's a thing there to speed up to shrink that time is without even having to really learn. Well, I guess you're learning a new skill to do it, but still the fact that there's an accelerant there is very appealing.
Yeah. And I think one thing that perhaps isn't talked about as much is that it's a great accelerant if you know what you're doing. I don't know what effect it might have on somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, somebody who's like relatively new to programming, right? Is this helpful to them, or is it sort of just helping them shoot themselves in the foot faster or harder, right? I don't know, because I don't have that experience. I haven't talked to... I mean, I have heard from a lot of people who say that they don't like it. They don't understand what's so good about Copilot. Maybe this is part of that they would benefit more if they had more experience programming.
Yeah. That sounds plausible to me.
Yeah, but I think over time these tools will get better, and they will get better at servicing the needs of less experienced programmers as well.
That seems right.
But I'm curious actually about sort of the utility of LLMs in pair programming, because at the moment, one of the complaints that I got on my video where I was using an LLM for the first time programming, I got 100 people saying, "Oh, this is awesome," but some people said, "I can't follow along with what you're doing anymore. In your past videos, you would explain what you were doing and sort of type it out while you were explaining, and I could learn. But now you just type a little bit, a lot of code shows up, and you look at it and you say, oh, that's right. And then you move on to the next thing, and I can't follow." And I feel a bit like when you're using this in a pair programming context, if you're sitting with a senior engineer and he presses a few keys and like a huge block of code shows up and he just says, oh, that's exactly what I want to do, like autocomplete, continue with the next thing. That's probably harder to learn from as the junior sitting along, right?
That sounds right, yeah.
So what do you do with that? I don't know.
I mean, I think probably a core skill of programming is a probably good measure of your like familiarity and skill with programming is how fast you can read code and understand it and grok it. So yeah. In a way, the junior person should be trying to get better at looking at the big chunk of code that just got inserted and going, yep, that's what we wanted. And so there might be some benefit in the like trying to keep up with the slightly more experienced person and sort of like try to read it as fast as they are and take it in.
Oh, you think it's like a 4-minute mile kind of thing?
Maybe, yeah. Like, do you get better at reading code quickly if you don't try to read it faster sometimes? Maybe not.
Yeah, and also like, well, once we start doing this, then we'll realize that, oh, juniors are perfectly capable of going faster. We just never pushed them before.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also, yeah. I also imagine it's not just, I imagine you are probably not always reading every little symbol that comes as you insert it, and more like
No.
the shape is right. I'm not seeing any red flags immediately in here. This is roughly what I expected. And learning that kind of ability to kind of glance at a block of code and go like, yeah, I think that's rightish, is probably also a thing you're training here, and that seems useful too.
Yeah, true. Yeah. But that's one aspect of LLM and sort of how it affects pairing.
Yeah.
And I think there's another thing also where can you use LLMs to pair with you, sort of organize it in that way somehow. And GitHub is definitely trying. They have this Copilot chat thing that you can talk to, but I feel like the real pair experience requires like unprovoked random comments coming from
Yeah.
from somebody, right?
Right. Yeah, that sounds right.
There's a killer product.
Yeah, that does sound really good, right? I think as long as depends. I mean, it's all in the details. Are the suggestions good?
Right. Yeah, like just you get a pop-up suggesting you rename all the variables every now and then.
Sure. Yeah. But that is interesting. I was also thinking it's not just the random comments, but it's also the like, and then sometimes it's typing. It'll do the typing for you. So it's like, hey, like, should we maybe add a test for this? Do we want? I'll do it. Sure. Boom. There's the test. Like that. There's some niceness to that, I think.
That capability feels very, very close.
Yeah, that sounds right. Sounds right to me.
It's more like the discussion sort of, not just local, but like architectural discussion about the whole project and like, oh, where does this fit in? How do we evolve and so on.
Totally. Yeah, I think folks are probably pushing on that real actively, getting bigger context windows to understand the whole project to make that kind of advice.
Yeah. Do you think there's future in Tuple for a tool like that to be integrated in your product?
Possibly. It's so different than the world we've been in so far, that it feels it'd be like a pretty big new frontier for us. I'd say maybe.
Yeah. It's a little buzzwordy.
That doesn't bother me with the buzzwordy bit. It's, I guess it's the question of like, is this our lane? Do our customers want this? I think there is some value in simple tools, and like we are mostly about connecting humans to humans, and people tell us sometimes like, please don't add anything else to this. Like I like the small footprint. I like the simplicity.
That's fair.
Yeah. One of our employees had this great analogy that I really liked, which is thinking about software as having different food groups in it, and new features are like carbs. Like they give you energy to work on. They're exciting, but they also kind of like bloat you a little bit. They can add a lot of calories, and so you don't want to like eat too many of them. You want to make sure you're eating your vegetables first, of like quality and reliability and that sort of thing. So an LLM pairing assistant is a lot of carbs. So I want to make sure we've eaten a lot of protein and veggies before we add that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Cool. Well, maybe we leave it there. We're right at an hour. This has been great.
Sure. Yeah, this is great indeed. Very interesting. So many things to talk about.
Totally. Is there anything we didn't cover that it's on top of mind, or you think would be fun to chat about?
Nothing comes to mind immediately. It's your show. You pick the topics.
Fair enough.
It's really fun to just talk about these random things like this because it sort of just reactivates these neural pathways that have been dormant for a while.
Nice. Yeah, I like it too. Actually, there's maybe one more thing that I'll ask you about before we wrap. Mm-hmm. You're now operating a much more mature open source ecosystem, basically, at this point, series of projects. Yeah. Like I glanced at this week's stats, and there were 73 PRs merged from 29 authors across 187 commits, which is substantial. And there's, I think, 1,000 plus contributors now across these projects. so different than your early days. How are you handling? I guess you have some employees now. Is that your answer to how you handle this like much greater volume?
Not really. So my employees are specifically tasked with working on the browser only. So the greater Serenity OS project just keeps running in the same way that it always has. I have a bunch of co-maintainers that I've appointed to help sort of move the PR queue along and help people polish their changes until they're good. But the whole thing has grown organically, very much just based on what we need at the moment. Just trying to figure out what is the smallest incremental step that we can do to keep everything working the way we like it, but just improve it a little bit so that it's easier for everybody. And for the longest time, the first couple of years, I was the only one who could merge a PR. But at some point, I realized that the PR number keeps going up and I can't get it to go down anymore. So I had to appoint some more maintainers. And I did that. And then eventually it started going up faster than they could bring it down. So we had to get more maintainers. And it's been like this organic growth of infrastructure around that. But it somehow, I don't fully understand this myself, but we've managed to build a community that takes care of itself, that regulates itself and polices itself, and produces consistently high quality code. And people help each other do that, and it works beautifully. And I can say that I started the project, I seeded the culture, and I did my best to set it up in a way that I thought would be nice for everybody, but it's very much a living organism on its own at this point. Like, I go days in a row without merging code.
Okay. And there are areas of the code base that you know nothing about. You've just. Is that
Yeah,
true?
for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was talking to somebody, I think it was just this morning, somebody who came into our Discord for the first time, a new user. And he said that he feels very intimidated by this huge code base because there's all this stuff. And like, I feel like I can't learn all this. And I really have to learn all this to work on it. And I told him that I don't know how all this works anymore. And he said that was a relief. So
nice.
I think that's good. Good to know for people that nobody knows how everything works anymore. But we have a distributed network of experts and enthusiasts. And I think really that's the biggest thing you can hope for when you start an open source project, is that one day it will be maintained by a network of experts rather than by just you, right? And you have all these people around the world who know how part of it works, and all those experts overlap and they cooperate, and it's beautiful. It's like the best it can be.
That is beautiful. And I think I've seen you write, you're sort of thinking about what happens to this project when I'm gone, or like how it will outlive you and what it will be. And it's that long time horizon again, where if you think about that being the goal that it should live on, then you have to release control. You have to delegate. You have to establish this network and this self-healing, self-policing kind of community around something.
Indeed. Because you can't always be there to steer things. So it's the same thing with like community behavior. That when we started our Discord server, we had a very small set of rules that we started with. I just made a list of things I thought, oh, this is probably a good set of rules. And then a few situations have come up over the years where we had to add a new rule because somebody discovered a new way to annoy everybody. But it was interesting to sort of evolve a set of rules for community behavior instead of, I know it's very, very popular to sort of take these ready-made set of rules.
Right. Grab the code of conduct from somewhere and throw it in your thing.
Right. And that never seemed right to me, that you would just like take somebody else's rule list and say, okay, now the community is going to conform to this set of rules that come from somewhere else. It has nothing to do with us, and has no sort of relationship with the sort of social issues that we've had in our community.
Yeah.
So yeah, we grew our code of conduct, if you will, organically, and it has worked beautifully.
Very nice. Cool. And if someone wants, they could take that and start their own project with it and ignore all your advice.
Yeah, I guess so. No, I know that at least one other project has sort of adapted, not adopted, but adapted our rules. But really, I would, if I were to give any advice about this, I would say like just make your own list of rules, and then be willing to iterate on it, because every community is different. And if you think that your software community is like just a generic one size fits all software community that can have a generic set of rules, I think it's more complicated than that, and you have to be willing to experiment a little bit.
Well, this seems to be the theme of you of start from scratch, make your own thing, iterate on it, spin that loop.
Yeah, true. We do that for everything.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be working. Thanks so much for coming on. This was like such a nice chat. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise, I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for all the help you've fairly directly given to Tuple through Spencer over the years.
Sure.
Yeah. All right.